When you're standing in front of a shelf of pre-built gaming rigs, the first thing that jumps out is the sheer amount of hype. i9 14900K, RTX 5070, 32GB DDR5, it sounds like a monster, but the real question is whether that monster will actually fit into your daily routine without turning your desk into a heatsink or your wallet into a black hole. I'm going to walk through exactly that, the day-to-day reality of the Hyper Cyber Phantom, the moments where it shines, the spots where it might leave you wishing for something else, and who should really consider spending their hard-earned cash on this particular box. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the kind of setup most gamers have today. Most people aren't building a custom water-cooled rig from scratch, they're looking for a plug-and-play desktop that will handle the latest titles at high settings, let them stream or edit videos on the side, and still be quiet enough not to drown out conversation. The Phantom promises exactly that, an Intel Core i9 14900K paired with an RTX 5070, 32GB of DDR5 and a 1TB SSD. On paper that's a lot of horsepower, but the practical question is how the system manages power, heat, and noise when it's actually being used. What I found most reassuring about the Phantom is its cooling solution. The tower includes a fairly robust fan array that, while not the quietest in absolute terms, stays under 35 dB during intensive gaming sessions like Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440p ultra settings. That means you can hear the in-game soundtrack, but you're not constantly reminded that a high-end CPU is working overtime. The extra heat pipes and a well-ventilated chassis also keep the SSD from throttling, which is something you'll notice when loading large open-world maps. Load times stay comfortably under a minute, even after an hour of continuous play. Now, the RTX 5070 is a step up from the typical 3060/3070 you see in many mid-range builds, and it does give you a noticeable lift in frame rates. In my tests with Elden Ring at 1080p high settings, I was consistently pulling 110,120 frames per second, which is smooth enough to hit a 144Hz monitor sweet spot. At 1440p, the card still held above 80 frames per second, which most gamers consider the threshold for a buttery experience without having to dip settings dramatically. What's more, the card handles ray tracing decently thanks to DLSS 3, so you can actually see those reflections and shadows without the game feeling like it's crawling. That said, there are trade-offs that become clear once you start using the machine for more than just gaming. The 32GB of DDR5 is excellent for multitasking, but the motherboard is locked to a single GPU slot, which means you can't add a second graphics card later if you ever want to go SLI, or its modern equivalent. For most gamers that's a non-issue, but if you're thinking about future-proofing with dual GPU compute workloads, you'll run into a wall. Also, the system comes pre-installed with Windows 11 Home. It works fine out of the box, but power users who prefer a clean install will need to wipe the drive and reinstall, which adds an extra step for folks who aren't comfortable with that process. One of the hidden costs of any high-end pre-built is the peripheral ecosystem. The Phantom ships with a decent tower and RGB lighting that looks great in a dim room, but it does not include any monitor, keyboard, or mouse. If you're starting from scratch, you'll need to allocate additional budget for a display that can actually showcase the RTX 5070's capabilities, something like a 144Hz 1440p panel. The lack of bundled accessories isn't a deal-breaker, it's just a factor you have to plan for when calculating total spend. Who should buy this rig? If you're a serious gamer who wants to jump into the latest releases at high settings, stream on Twitch, and maybe dabble in video editing without having to wait for renders, the Phantom hits a sweet spot. The combination of an i9 14900K and RTX 5070 means you have more CPU headroom than many comparable systems, which translates into smoother performance in CPU-heavy titles like Assassin's Creed Valhalla or when you have Chrome tabs, Discord, and OBS open simultaneously. It also suits creators who need that extra RAM for 3D modeling or Photoshop work while still being able to game in the same session. On the flip side, if your primary use case is casual gaming at 1080p or you're content with a 60Hz monitor, you're probably overpaying for a machine that's built for higher performance. The same performance you'd get from a slightly lower tier build, say, an i7 14700K paired with an RTX 4060 Ti, would likely be more cost-effective for those needs. Additionally, if you're a laptop-centric user who values portability, this desktop's bulk and power draw, it can push close to 500W under load, may not align with your lifestyle. Another practical consideration is the warranty and after-sales support. Hyper's Cyberstore lists a standard 1-year warranty, which is fairly typical for pre-built PCs. In the few community threads I skimmed, owners reported that the